evaluate each of the following, and then we're given 6 different square roots to evaluate. We'll go through them one at a time. Let's start with the square root of 25. When we are asked to find the square root of a number, we're being asked what number could we square to get the number on the inside. This is called a radical symbol, and the number inside is the radicand. And so if we're taking the square root of 25, we're looking for a number that we could square to get 25, and that is 5. The square root of 25 is 5 because we can take 5 squared and get 25. Now, it's also true that negative 5 squared gives us 25. Negative 5 times negative 5 equals positive 25. But when we have this radical symbol written like this tells us that we're looking for the principal square root or the non-negative square root. So basically the positive one. If we wanted the negative square root, we would have a negative sign out front, like we'll see in a couple of examples. But for right now, we have the square root of 25 equals 5. Let's move on. The square root of 144. We need to know what number we can square to get 144, or what number we can multiply by itself to get 144. Many students know from memorizing their times tables back in elementary school that 12 times 12 is 144, so the square root of 144 equals 12. And I'm going to just write out, this is because 12 squared equals 144. I'm not always going to write out this reasoning. I'm just going to do it the first couple of times in case there are students who really don't feel very comfortable with square roots, so they can see why these work out the way that they do. One thing that you can do, if you don't know off the top of your head that 12 times 12 is 144, you can guess and check to see if your answer is right. If we had guessed 10, well, 10 times 10 gives us 100, and we want 144, so 100 was too small. That means 10 is too small, so you could try 11. 11 times 11, if you do the math, is 121. Still too small, we need 144, so you try the next number. 12 times 12 gives us 144, so we know that the square root of 144 is 12. Let's look at the next one. We have the negative square root of 196. When we have a negative number in front of a radical, that means we want the negative square root. And so we are going to have negative something. Now, we're looking for the square root of 196, and that's larger than 144. 196 is larger than 144, so we know the answer is going to be larger than 12. It can't be 13, because 13 times 13 ends up being an odd number, because an odd number times an odd number is odd, and this is even. So we can try 14, and if you go and do the math, 14 times 14 is 196. So the answer here is negative 14, because we're looking for the negative square root. Now, if we look at the next one is a little bit different. It has the negative inside the radical. And so we're asked to find the square root of negative 196. And there are no real numbers that we can square and end up with a negative answer. If we take a positive times a positive, we end up with a positive. And if we take a negative and square it, a negative times a negative is also a positive. So there's no way to square any real numbers and get a negative. So for right now, we're going to say that this is undefined. We cannot take the square root of a negative number. Now, you will learn later in your math class that there is a special way to do this, and it involves something called an imaginary number. But for right now, we're just going to say that if we're asked to find the square root of a negative number, it is undefined. All right, let's look at the next one. We've got the square root of 900. We need to ask ourselves what we can multiply by itself to get 900. Now, 900 is much larger than 196, so we know we're going to have an answer that's much larger than 14. Some of you already know what the answer is. If you're really good at multiplication, you might know, but let's pretend that we don't. Let's try 20. If we take 20 times 20, 0 times anything is 0, so that first row is going to be 0. Then we put in the placeholder. 2 times 0 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So we end up with 400. But we need 900, so we need something bigger. And so we can try 30. 30 times 30. The same thing's going to happen in the beginning. That first row is going to be 0. We bring down a placeholder. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 3 is 9. 0 plus 900 is 900. And that's exactly what we wanted. So since 30 can be squared to get 900, that means the square root of 900 is 30. If we had gotten an answer that was too big, then we would know 30 was too big, and we'd be looking for something in between 20 and 30. But we figured it out. We've got one more square root to take. Let's look at the square root of 36 over 81. There's a trick if we're looking for the square root of a fraction, and that trick is that we can take the square root of the top and the square root of the bottom separately. So here in the top, what can we square to get 36? Well, 6 times 6 is 36, so the numerator is going to be 6. And then in the bottom, what times what is 81? 9 times 9 is 81. So we have 6 ninths, and in this case, this happens to reduce. It reduces to 2/3, so our answer here is going to be 2/3.